what I've learned about myself, and I don't know this about you, but I assume it's true. Every great and lasting story of my life, I mean the ones that I always remember, the ones that my friends always remind me about, the one that my family always reminds me about, are the ones that started off with me or somebody else saying this immortal phrase, hey, you know what'd be cool? You know what I mean? Like you're sitting around with some friends, sitting around with some family. Hey, you know what'd be cool if we did this? If we did this. I remember being in high school and making a presentation. We had a video camera and 3 teenage boys, so what could go wrong? And we decided that we needed to make a presentation. And we were in the cafeteria, after school, video camera, unsupervised. And it went about like you thought it would. Somebody looked at somebody else and said, hey, you know what'd be cool? We should take that trash can over there. John should get in it. That trash can had rollers on underneath it. We should try to make it act like a skateboard and jump down these 3 stairs right here. What could go wrong? This is going to be awesome. John got a concussion. But it was fine. It was totally fine. Or maybe there was the time when I was also in high. A lot of this has to do with stories in high school. I'm remembering now. But I was also in high school. My sister, who's younger than me, got mad, and as she was prone to do, kind of went out of the house and said, "I'm going out here." And she went out to the car for some reason. It's the summer in Texas, and it's really hot. But she went out and decided to slam the door and sit in the car while I was doing this number. And so I, being her big brother, was very worried about her, and I looked at my mom, and I looked at my brother, and I looked at my dad, and I said, hey, you know it'd be cool if I go out there and scare her. Because that's exactly what she needed in that moment, was for her big brother to come relieve her anger with me scaring her. It was great. So I sneak out of the house, I open the door, and I sneak out of the house, and I start crawling up, man. I'm prowling. I'm like a lion on the savannah as I'm sneaking towards this car. She can't see me. Somehow I'm just getting closer and closer. And finally I get up to the car. She's sitting in the driver's seat. And I get up to the car and I pounce, man. I jump up and I'm like, ah! And she's like, ah! And she loses her mind. She's like, ah! And in my victory jump, right? You have to have a victory jump in a moment like that. So I turn back to the house and to where my mom and dad and brother are, and I'm turning, arms raised high, triumphant. Yes! I forgot. There was a branch of a mesquite tree that went right there next to the car, and I went boom, smack into this thing, just hit myself so hard. I fell down on the ground, started bleeding, and as you know, whenever there's a head wound, you're going to bleed like a stuck hog, as they say where I'm from. You're going to just keep bleeding a lot. And so my sister, her emotions went from angry to scared, to angry again, back to very concerned about the loss of blood right now. Oh, man, it all started off with, you know what'd be cool? And we all have those friends in our life who kind of, they hear that or they say that, and then you start doing something together, and they ratchet things up a little bit. Like they take it a little bit further than you're really comfortable with. Somehow they get everybody else and you to go along with it. Maybe you are this friend. If so, shame on you. You are this person maybe. But somebody in the friend group is like, yeah, we should do this. And then we should do this. I remember one time I was in college and we decided to jump into a frozen pond. And my friend Dave's like, yeah, now ride in the back of my truck. I'm like, huh? You won't do it. Okay. We'll try it. Jesus is that friend, right? Jesus is that friend who will take it up a notch, take it to a place where you're uncomfortable, where you're maybe even a little scared about things. And you're saying, wait a second, I thought Jesus was meek and mild. Well, I'm about to tell you a story from Mark chapter 5 that may change your perception. See, we're in a series called Chasing the Lion, as Jeff was talking about earlier in the service, where we're looking at following Jesus through the Gospel of Mark. Now, if you're online, I'm so glad that you're online. And for those of you in the room, you know this, something that they don't notice, that we have our windows open here in the sanctuary, because throughout the series, I want you to notice that we have these stained glass windows up here, and they have pictures from scenes of the life of Jesus. We wanted to really drive that home, that we're following Jesus. In fact, that's why one of the reasons stained glass was really used early on was to help tell the story of Jesus in churches for a population that couldn't read. So I hope that while you're in here during this series, you'll look up and see the life of Jesus as portrayed here. One of the stories that we're going to look at from Mark chapter 5 really drives home the point that Jesus will do things that you don't expect Jesus to do. Jesus will take you to places you're not really expecting to go, and maybe you wouldn't go unless he drug you. Now remember, as we follow through the Gospel of Mark, that Mark's Gospel isn't written from a first-hand account. He's getting all of his information from one primary source, and it's a pretty good one, Peter. Peter. You know, Jesus' right-hand man, the guy that Jesus always relied on, the one that Jesus looked at Peter and said, on this rock I will build my church. This is where Mark is getting all of his information from. Mark was kind of a translator, an aid to Peter. So when you read the words of the Gospel of Mark, really you're reading kind of Peter's biography of Jesus. These are stories that Peter had told 100 times, 1,000 times, maybe 1,000,000 times, who knows. He told these stories so many times. And Mark started writing them down. And you have to imagine if Peter's telling this story to people, he's probably getting his eyes real wide when he tells certain stories. You know, like the resurrection or the time that Jesus called him. I think Mark chapter 5 is one of those stories. Because it all started off with Jesus walking over to the disciples and saying something probably along the lines of, hey, you know what would be really cool? If we go to the other side of the lake. Now, for you and me, that's just, you know, getting in a little John boat or something like that and going across the way. You turn on your little motor or something, go across the way. Maybe you have a canoe and you're really good at that, and you just go, start going across with your friends. And they were in a glorified, gigantic canoe, but going across the lake was pretty difficult because this lake was about 8 miles wide. We know it as the Sea of Galilee. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to the Sea of Galilee or if you've heard a lot about it. I've been a couple of times. It's beautiful, picturesque. It's wonderful. It is very big. But from where Jesus was going to the other side of the lake, that was a very different place. He was on the Jewish side, the place where everybody kind of followed the same rules and thought the same way. But the other side wasn't that way. The other side, well, that was the unclean side. That was the area that you didn't want to go. That was a place a good Jewish boy or girl did not want to be. This was the non-Jewish side, the Gentile side. And it was known as the Decapolis, this region of the Decapolis. This is 10 cities all kind of coming together in a general area. They each had their own little districts and areas and territories, but it was all kind of the same. And they did not really mingle in with the Jews who lived there very well. They didn't really like it when the Jews came over across. So the Sea of Galilee, this lake that kind of separated them, really separated two gigantic culture differences, didn't it? There was this gigantic cultural gap separated by this lake. So when these 12 Jewish guys and their Jewish teacher come across the lake and land and come ashore, they're probably thinking to themselves, what have we gotten ourselves into? They're probably anticipating somebody coming up and saying, hey, get out of here. Because the Jews and the non-Jews of that area didn't get along very well already. They were expecting people to want to kick them out. And they hadn't even gotten out of the boat yet when something crazy happened. All of a sudden, they hear screaming. Jesus steps off on the dry land. A couple others step off on a dry land. You can hear Peter telling the story to Mark and to others. Hey, there's dry land, and they're on it, and some are still in the boat, and they start hearing screaming. Just unintelligible screaming. They look up, and there's a man over by these caves where there were tombs, and he starts running at them full tilt. Like, I don't know if you've ever had somebody run at you full tilt. It's a frightening proposition. Like, even if you're playing a game and you're expecting it, somebody running at you all out, like that's nerve-wracking. But if you're in public, say literally you're outside and somebody just locks eyes with you and starts running towards you, That's a terrifying moment. You don't know what to do. Now imagine you're Peter or one of his cohort, and you step off into this area where you're expecting people to not want you around, and all of a sudden you hear somebody scream at you and start running at you full on. That's scary. So if I'm Peter or one of these guys, I'm getting back in the boat. I'm getting back in the boat. Jesus can come if he wants to. I'm probably going to leave him there. I'll maybe push off, maybe paddle out a little bit of ways, see if this guy can swim if he wants to get to me and yell at me. That's fine. But Jesus isn't moved. He stands right there. This guy comes running up, is screaming and screaming, and before he can say anything else, Jesus looks at him and he says, "Come out of him, impure spirit." Not exactly what I would have said. I would have been like, "Hey, is there something wrong? Are we on your land? Everything okay?" Jesus says, "Come out of him, impure spirit." And with that, this guy falls on his face, and says, "Please don't torture me. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Well, the disciples had heard some of Jesus casting out demons before. The disciples had seen that, but this is kind of new, where the demons start saying, "You're the Son of the Most High God," where the demon recognizes who Jesus is. It's also important for us to note that the demon does this. Because in those days, at least in antiquity, to be able to name someone else, to know someone else's name was to have power over them. It was perceived that you had a little bit of authority over them. That's why if you look throughout the Old Testament and other works of literature from that time period, you'll see that people don't often offer up their name. They don't just come right and say, you and I will walk up and we'll say, "Hi, how you doing? I'm Josh. I do this here and all that." They wouldn't offer up their name. You had to work to find out somebody's name because they didn't want you to have power over them. If you go look throughout your English translation of the Hebrew Bible, for instance, right, in the Old Testament, you'll see there sometimes Lord is written in all caps. That's because that is the proper name of God. But you're not allowed to say it in Hebrew. Part of that reason was because when people said the name of God, there was this perception that they were trying to control God, as if they had authority over God. But the name of God was too holy because God was too holy, so you couldn't do that. You'll read throughout antiquity people invoking the names of gods and demons and the principalities or whatever, any kind of supernatural, so that they can get those supernatural beings to do what they want. So when this demon says, "Jesus, Son of the Most High God," what he's saying is, I know who you are, and now I have a little power over you. Jesus is undeterred. He doesn't care. Jesus' point is to go back and say, yeah, that's great. Now, what's your name? Jesus stands strong. What's your name? And what follows, I think, is one of the creepiest moments in all of Scripture. Put yourself there as if you're there with Peter. Maybe you're in the boat, maybe you're standing next to him, I don't know. Put yourself there in this moment. Jesus says, "What's your name?" And here's the response. "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." I want you to notice the shift from first person singular, my name, to second person plural, for we are many. That's a weird shift, even if you say it in a normal voice. But let me give you a dramatic reenactment, okay? "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." That's creepy, right? I always imagine when he says that part that there's like 20,000 voices going at once. We are many. This is that part of the horror movie where some little 10-year-old girl is crab walking backwards towards you and her head spinning around and she's saying your name creepily. Right? That's what's going on here, that sort of thing. My name is Legion, for we are many. Now that's creepy in and of itself. But this name Legion would have invoked a lot of fear in Jesus' disciples. It was meant to. See, a legion was a unit of 6,000 soldiers in the Roman army, and they were known for being some elite soldiers. They were known for being those type of people who were violent and lived in a world of violence. They did violent things. When people heard the legion was coming, they got scared. A lot of them ran away. And here's why. Here's why. Because you got 6,000 soldiers who live a violent life. Statistically, at least one of those 6,000 soldiers, probably more, are not going to be very good people. They're going to be people who take advantage of others, people who hurt other people. Remember, these are people who are thousands of miles from home. They weren't recruited the next town over. They are thousands of miles of home, most likely. They don't like being where they're at. They're probably hungry. They probably want what they want. Legions within the Roman army were known for murder, for rape, for abuse. And often, they acted with impunity. Nobody could do anything toward them. They were the Roman army. You were just supposed to get out of their way and be scared. And so when the legions were coming through, a lot of people would pack up and go to the hills. They would move off somewhere else for a little bit until the legion was gone. And that is why the demon uses that type of name. He's trying to drive home that there are many of us in here, but legion. He could have just said, we're a lot of people. My name is Legion. Trying to scare Jesus. But as you might imagine, Jesus is not scared. This demon recognizes that his time has come to an end, that things are different, so it starts begging, hey, don't send us out of here. Don't send us out of the area. We don't want to go anywhere else. The common thought in that time was that demons needed a host, always wanted a host, didn't want to be just out in the wind somewhere. So the demon begs, don't send us out of the area. Send us into those pigs. The man looks up and says, there's pigs on the hillside in a pig herd. There's 2,000 of them with their pig herders, their handlers all around them. Send us into those pigs. And so Jesus says, okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Now, what we have to remember is that Jesus' primary concern, his first and foremost concern, is that this person made in the image of God has been hurting for a long time. And he's here to fix that. That's his primary concern. This is the person who we know has been chained. This is the person who we know has been beaten. In fact, one of the Greek words they use when they're talking about the way the townspeople around had treated this man was they tried to tame him. They tried to tame him like a wild animal. They literally viewed him like a wild animal. And when you view somebody like a wild animal, you're going to treat them like a wild animal. They tried to chain him, but they couldn't hold him. The ropes wouldn't hold. Chains wouldn't hold. They excluded him. They kind of abandoned him to the cemetery. And as long as he stayed there, everything was going to be all right. Everything was fine. If he came out, they'd beat him back into submission, get him back over there. They warned their kids. They say, look, if you act like this, if you hang out with those people, you're going to end up like that guy. He was the boogeyman of the area. All the 10-year-old boys, to prove their manhood, to prove their strength, would go up there and get as close as they possibly could. He was that guy. But Jesus sees a human being made in the image of God. And that is his primary concern. And so Jesus says, yeah, fine, go ahead. Just leave this guy alone. Fine, go ahead. And what happens next is kind of wild. The demons go into these pigs, and these pigs go crazy and start storming down the hill, and they go straight into the lake, and they drown. And they don't drown because pigs can't swim. As you know, pigs are able to swim. They drown because these demons bring them down and kill them. Friends, that's exactly what evil is designed to do. It destroys things. And every time you and every time I invite evil into our life in any capacity, whether big or small, medium, large, whatever, anytime we invite evil into our life, we do so to our own destruction. When we invite evil, maybe let's say it with the church word sin. Right? We invite sin, those things that God doesn't approve of, those things that God doesn't want for our lives, the things that God would not have us to do. When we invite that stuff into our lives, when we participate in those things, we invite our own destruction in our life. over and over and over again. You know this to be true. When you've invited those things into your life, when you've participated in that stuff, it was always to your own peril. Now, you can concoct theories to make it feel all right. You can come up with reasons for why it wasn't really that big of a deal, and you can gather people around you that you respect who will pat you on the back and say, oh, don't worry, everybody messes up. Don't worry about that. It's not really that big a deal. They're trying to make you feel better, but really what happens is you start excusing the evil that you find in your life. And you do so to your own peril. You're inviting your own destruction in. Now, a lot of us, we have trouble. We have trouble with this story, especially up to this point. We have trouble for two main reasons. The first is that a lot of us struggle with the idea of demons. We struggle with the idea of demons. In 21st century America, we've kind of gotten away from this idea. Many people don't believe in angels or demons. They believe in God, but maybe they don't even believe in the devil himself. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other about demons. What I want to say to you is this. Like you may be saying he has a mental health issue, right? What I want to say to you is this. Whether it's a mental health issue or demons or something else, Jesus recognized that this person made in the image of God really, really and truly needed help. And Jesus stepped in to help. Now the second reason some of us struggle with this story is because these poor pigs are innocent, right? They're poor pigs, they're innocent, and they die. And so the response is often, why would Jesus kill these pigs? They did nothing to anyone. Why would Jesus kill these pigs? Well, Jesus didn't kill the pigs, did he? It was the presence of evil that drug them under, that destroyed them. It wasn't Jesus that did that sort of thing. But Jesus allowed that to happen so that this man, this person made in the image of God, might be saved, might be made whole. Now, as you might imagine, the people who own these pigs, the people who are tending after these pigs, the people who really needed these pigs for their livelihood, the people who were going to eat these pigs and barter with these pigs, all of that, they were a little upset. They were a little bit upset. We see in verse 14, right? Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. You do the same thing. If you were the pig herders, you would have done the exact same thing. You'd have been running around telling everybody, this guy just came and somehow made all my pigs go into the water, and now they're dead, and I'm going to be poor forever. You would have done the same thing. And if you were a town person, you would have come out to look too. If somebody said that, your friends, your neighbor, said something crazy like that had just happened, you'd come running out to see what happened too. And this is what happens when they get there. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. The same one that they had chained up, the same one they had beaten back many times, the same one they had warned their kids about. He was sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. They weren't happy. They weren't overjoyed. They weren't even amazed. They were afraid. Isn't that how it goes? When God starts doing something new in somebody's life, when God gets a hold of somebody, when somebody starts getting their life together, there's always people who stand off on the side going, I don't know. Right? They're standing off on the side saying, I don't know. I don't really like that. I don't know what's going on there. Waiting for the other shoe to drop sometimes. It almost reminds you of the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son, right? The son goes off with his inheritance, loses everything, comes back, and instead of being mad at the son, the father throws a big party. And while this party is going on, the other son, the good son, the one that never left, comes back and sees this, and then he's mad. And the father comes out and says, why are you so mad? And the son's like, because I never left. So rather than being happy that his brother was back, he was angry. He was upset. He was hurt. The reason these people are so afraid, rather than being happy, rather than being overjoyed, is because the power that Jesus uses, the power that Jesus brings to the situation, totally shattered their way of doing things. I mean, they could get along as long as this guy was up in those caves and away from them. As long as this guy lived at the cemetery and left him alone, everything was fine. But here comes Jesus, this guy they don't even know, and he ruins everything. He's messing up their society. He's messing up their ability to decide for themselves what should happen to this guy. He's messing up their ability to have, like, pig for dinner. They're messing up that person's livelihood over there. He's upsetting the economy. No, Jesus, you can't do that. You can't do that sort of thing. See, they were more concerned with their way of controlling things and doing things their own way rather than this man being set free from everything that had been plaguing him, from everything that had been torturing him for years and years and years. They're more interested in what's good for them and for their own way rather than in the good of this person who was created in the image of God. And here's why. Because Jesus scares people who want their own way. Over and over in your life, you'll notice this to be true. Jesus always scares people who want their own way. When you have your own worldview and you're stuck to it, and it seems like Jesus is going to ask you to do something different than your own worldview, that's always going to scare you. It's always going to bother you. It's always going to make you feel uncomfortable. Over and over in your life. Maybe you've never decided to follow Jesus, right? Part of the reason we don't follow Jesus is because we want our own way. We want to do things our way, and it scares us to think that we would have to do things Jesus' way. I'll never live up to that, some of my friends have told me. I'll never be able to do what you do, Josh. I can't do that. Or maybe you said yes to Jesus one time when you were 10 years old. You walked an aisle at church, or you came up front at camp, or maybe you were around a campfire when you were in high school or something, and you said yes to Jesus, but you kind of intellectually assented, but as you went on through life, you stopped really following after Jesus. You wanted to live that college lifestyle. You wanted to live that certain type of life, and you wanted to do things your way. And the idea of really following Jesus scares you a little bit. You'd have to give up all that stuff you worked so hard to get. You'd have to give up some of those friends you tried so hard to impress for so long. You'd have to give up some of that time that you really like to have to yourself. Jesus scares people who want their own way. So where do you fall in all of this? Where do you fall in all of this? If you were standing there right now in front of God himself, what would you say? What do you think God would be saying? That's something only you can piece together. Here's what I know. Saying no to Jesus because it would be too hard is one of the dumbest things you can do. Saying no to Jesus because it would be too hard, that doesn't cut it. Because when you say no to Jesus, what you're saying yes to is a path that will only lead you to your own heartbreak, your own destruction, and your own death. So my prayer for you is that you would leave the darkness and run to the light, because in that life there is freedom. In that life there is joy. Run to that. Do things the way Jesus does them. Love people the way Jesus loves them. Fight for people the way Jesus fights for them. Let the chips fall where they may, but do things the way that Jesus would do them. Fight for the same people that Jesus would fight for. That's what he's called us to do. And remember this, when you face opposition in your life while you do that thing, that Jesus will always scare people who want their own way. You just keep going forward. Let's pause for just one moment. Our band's going to lead us in another song, but I want to pray for you real quick, if that's all right. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for setting the example for us. We thank you for moving in our midst this morning. I pray that as we sing this next song, that you would begin stirring in our hearts who you've called us to be. Help us to go your way, not the way of destruction and death and heartbreak. Help us to go down your way, even when it scares us, even when it makes us feel uncomfortable, and help us to inspire others to do the same. I pray, give us courage that comes from knowing you, courage that comes from giving our lives to you.